to be pushed. I have been pushed for other reasons as well as High Commissioner of Human Rights to not launch certain documents. But I did it because it was my duty. And you have to do your duty. Otherwise, it's not worthy to be Secretary General.
In doing that duty,
Sorry?
the pushback from France, from Russia, the UK, the United States,
from many
China.
Countries. From many countries.
Thank you very much. Ms. Greenspan, the next Secretary General is likely to face sustained financial pressures as it undergoes this reform. If you had to make a difficult choice financially, what would you protect at the United Nations at all costs?
I don't agree with you. First of all, because if we start by saying first what is everything that we are going to cut or stop to do, we will be in the worst situation. I have negotiated a lot in financial scenarios. Believe me, that's not the first thing you do. First of all, we have to build on the resolution that just passed here on the liquidity crisis of the UN and convince, because I think that the financial crisis is linked to the political crisis of the organization. So we have to protect the center, we have to protect the charter, we have to protect the 3 pillars, but we have to be more agile, we have to be able to deliver better results, have more impact, and use our resources wisely to convince that we are able to use the taxpayers' resources in the best way possible. But don't start by giving up. That will be a bad strategy.
But even when many of those resources are being withheld, the amount of arrears right now to the UN, particularly by the United States, is unprecedented.
Absolutely. I understand that, and believe me, I know the numbers. Yes, but what I'm telling you is that it's not giving up from the beginning, not trying to convince, not trying to bring solutions to the problem that we are facing. And I think that part of it is try to have a stable financial path for the UN. When you don't know what you are counting on, you cannot be strategic and you cannot do your job. So I think that next year is a good year to have a package that will bring back a stable financial perspective for the UN.
President Sall, you have used the word trust several times here tonight. How would you actually preserve your independence in the face of the P5 without losing trust of either the Security Council or the people that you are going to represent?
J'ai déjà prouvé par mes responsabilités antérieures mon indépendance. Mon indépendance qui a consisté dans ma diplomatie à dire qu'il n'y a pas d'exclusivité, qu'il n'y a pas non plus d'exclusion. Le dialogue, pour moi, s'impose avec tout le monde. Et aujourd'hui, cette crise de liquidité, en réalité, elle met en sourdine une crise de confiance. Et le prétexte, c'est la réforme. Donc, j'ouvrirai vraiment open book les comptes de l'organisation. Je mettrai également à la disposition de tous les États membres les propositions de solutions de réforme, tant au plan budgétaire qu'au plan des ressources humaines, de façon transparente. À partir du moment où les choses sont claires avec tous les États membres, il appartient maintenant à chaque État membre de remplir sa part de responsabilité et donc de s'acquitter de son devoir qui est sa cotisation par rapport à l'organisation. Mais le premier acte, c'est rebâtir la confiance et ça va être l'élément le plus important, je crois, dans le travail du futur secrétaire général.
We now want to go back out to the audience for 2 questions, and the first one will be for Maria Fernanda Espinosa, coming from a UN member state representative.
Thank you. I am Ambassador Kalilu Ibrahim Tutangi, Deputy Permanent Representative of the Republic of Sierra Leone to the United Nations. As Secretary General, what specific UN Security Council reform would you champion? How would you engage in building the consensus to make it happen? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Excellency, for the question. I think that the Security Council needs to improve its working methods and needs to be more effective. There were few Months ago, there was a special session looking at implementation of the resolutions of the Security Council, and there were many options discussed there, which I fully support. Basically elevating the role of the Secretary General as an intelligence provider, as an honest broker, as scenario building, as providing options to the service of the Security Council members. Now, regarding the reform of the Security Council, we should not only focus on numbers, but we should focus on effectiveness and impact. With regard to the role of the Secretary General regarding the reform, the Secretary General has to provide prime secretariat support for a process that is in the hands of member states. I led, as president of the General Assembly, the IJN work, the intergovernmental negotiations on Security Council reform, which have been going on for a long time, and I think it's a debt that the system has. It's mandated also by the Pact of the Future. The role of the Secretary General should be to provide all the Secretariat support, encourage member states, but of course the reform process is entirely in the hands of member states.
Would you support adding a sixth permanent member to the Security Council, particularly from Africa?
There is no role for the Secretary General to support any particular position. There are many positions regarding the composition of the Security Council. My role would be to provide the advice, the Secretariat support, and if called and requested, operate as an honest broker within the House and among the members of the Security Council.
Our next audience question will go to Caroline Rodriguez Burkett, and it's coming from a member of the UN staff.
Good evening. My name is Feng Qi, and I work at the UN Secretariat here in New York. My question for you is, should you select it as the next Secretary General, how would you approach UN reform to strengthen staff morale, to improve managerial efficiency, and to ensure accountability across all levels of the organization? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and thank you for your work as a staff of the United Nations. First of all, we have already started in the Secretariat the reform to make it more efficient and more effective. And as Secretary General, I will continue that work to make, using technology, for example, to make it more effective. But a Secretary General is as strong as the team around her, and an organization is as strong as the people who work for it. And what I've heard in my consultations with member states, they would like to see the staff of the Secretariat look like the world it represents. And so certainly looking at the unrepresented and underrepresented countries will be a priority. I understand that change brings trepidation, and as we go through this reform, that will be very much present there. But I hope that I can be a motivator as well of staff as we work to deliver better.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Now we'll turn to our final section, Global Challenges and Opportunities. The defining challenges of the next decade, artificial intelligence, climate change, pandemics, migration, and economic fragmentation are reshaping the world faster than governments and international institutions can adapt. They transcend borders, blur the boundaries between peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights, and require new forms of international cooperation. Our final opening question is for all candidates. Each will have 1 minute to respond. The United Nations was created to bring governments together. Today, many of the world's most consequential decisions are not made by governments, but by private companies. What role should the Secretary General play in shaping the actions of powerful private actors who increasingly influence global security, development, and human rights? Mr. Macky Sall, we start with you.
Merci beaucoup. C'est un sujet très important puisqu'il concerne l'un des piliers les plus importants, c'est le pilier développement. Et on ne peut pas parler de développement aujourd'hui et de financement du développement, parler de prospérité partagée, sans changer le paradigme du développement. Il nous faut aujourd'hui créer l'opportunité d'élargir cette prospérité au niveau mondial. Ça veut dire qu'il faut réformer d'abord l'architecture financière internationale. Le seul financement public, on le sait, ne suffit pas pour apporter des réponses appropriées. J'engagerai des concertations et même un dialogue global avec les États membres, les institutions de Bretton Woods, les IFIs, c'est-à-dire les institutions financières internationales, mais surtout le secteur privé, la société civile et la philanthropie. C'est en combinant l'ensemble de ces acteurs pour avoir une nouvelle facilité d'accès à l'ensemble des pays pour créer les conditions d'une prospérité partagée que nous aurons un monde plus sûr, un monde plus prospère, mais une prospérité partagée pour tous. Donc le secteur privé aura un rôle capital pour avoir du blinded finance pour cela.
Thank you. Michelle Bachelet.
Well, I believe that the Secretary General has to be a convener. Talking about the different challenges you mentioned a lot of different ones, artificial intelligence, climate change, etc. And that the UN is a very unique place that to convene all stakeholders, for example, of course, governments, but also private sector, academia, person who develops technologies in the case of the artificial intelligence, to try to identify which are the ones that need to have a rule governance, a global governance, but on the same time to develop what we call a smart mix of measures that can on one hand give rules, clear rules, issues. So I think the Secretary General has been in the past, and can be a very important convener.
Now, polylateralism, that is multi-stakeholderism, that is that you have to bring the actors in the areas where you want to influence. And we need those that understand the technology, we need the science, but we need the private sector. And I think that we in the UN can use much more AI and much more new technologies to make us more efficient. And we can use it also in the scenarios of crisis to protect women, for example, with the technology in many of the crisis areas where women are suffering. So I think that this idea of polylateralism in the issues of technology and AI is very handy, is right, because we need to bring all the actors. Civil society has to be there because there are issues of human rights, there are issues of regulation, and the science that is now being convened by the Secretary General in the UN, I think that is a very important step forward in that direction.
Carolyn Rodriguez-Burkett.
I agree with former President Sall on the issue of development financing and how we can work with the international financial institutions. Ideally, it would be good if we have UN reform moving parallel with the reform of the financial institutions, but that might be too ambitious. But even if we can have small movements, incremental movements with the IFIs that are systemic and that will bring concessional financing, for example, to a large number of member states, especially developing member states, I think that will make things better for a lot of our people in the world. But I also want to speak about AI, because I believe that AI can be a force for good. But young people are concerned that AI will take their jobs, will kill their creativity. And so this UN, the wisdom of the 193, I believe, can come together to have an AI governance framework that can balance innovation and not stifle creativity, and at the same time, the concerns of our people.
Maria Fernanda Espinosa.
Well, I think the UN and the Secretary General is equipped to convene, to partner, to advocate. And that's exactly what we need in the world of today. You asked about the role of the private sector. And I think this is absolutely critical because that's where we see innovation, we see jobs, we see resources, and that's what developing countries need right now. They need investment, they need access to capital, they need technologies, they need opportunity. And that's exactly what the UN should help provide. I would also like to refer to the importance of artificial intelligence. There is a revolution happening in front of our eyes. And we have seen the UN already convene a few days ago in Geneva. The UN being a convener, but ensuring that AI is used for good, and that the source code of all the new technologies is human dignity. So we should share the opportunities, but also share the risk and work on them together. The UN is very well positioned on that. And again...
Please wrap it up, Ms. Espinosa.
Excuse me?
Please wrap it up.
Oh, well, I was going to say that we need to come to grips on how to better integrate the power of the private sector to work together hand in hand with the UN. This is very important, understanding, of course, very clearly that this organization is an intergovernmental organization. The same goes for civil society.
Rafael Mariano Grossi.
Self-evidence of what the question has, the role of the private sector, must be understood in the UN. And apart from general assertions, we must see where we need to understand that. Of course, in the area of development, this is quite clear. Official development assistance is diminishing at a dramatic pace, and we need to recognize that. We need to recognize how we do development assistance in a way that will allow capital investment, enabling measures to set foot and to allow this role of the private sector to be really efficient. So that requires an understanding that certain top-down approaches, sometimes ideological approaches, are not working. In the area which has been recognized by my colleagues here of artificial intelligence, coming from a technical organization like the IAEA, we are very much aware of that. Here, neither starry-eyed optimism nor unjustified fears, just the right approach, which is not a top-down thing. Yes, the UN is looking at it, but some others are doing it. Just a few days ago, a new international organization has been set up to deal with that. So this means...
Mr. Grossi, please wrap it up.
This means that there are different approaches.
Thank you. Now, staying in the area of global challenges and opportunities, we have a separate question for each candidate. Ms. Greenspan, we'll start with you, and it's on trade. Trade is increasingly being shaped by geopolitics rather than economics. Tariffs, export controls, and shifting supply chains are becoming tools of national security. What role should the Secretary General play in preventing economic fragmentation from becoming a source of global instability?
Thank you very much. Let me start to say from the beginning that in a multipolar world, if we don't have multilateralism, we will walk towards fragmentation. Multipolarity with multilateralism is what will give us the promise of inclusion and prosperity for all. So let's not see this as two different things. They are the same thing. Geoeconomics had a lot of space at the beginning of the century, yes? But now it's true. Geoeconomics and geopolitics are two sides of the same coin. You know that I come from a trade organization. I believe in trade. I believe in trade for small and medium-sized countries to be able to benefit from the global economy. And I think that multilateralism has to be put forward precisely to avoid fragmentation. Fragmentation will happen if multilateralism doesn't step up.
Just to follow up very quickly, powerful states weaponize trade. What mechanisms can be put in place to shift that behavior?
Well, but let me tell you, if you look at the numbers of trade last year, trade was much more resilient than all of us predicted. And why? Because we have regional trade. Regionalism is back. Integration, different agreements between groups of countries are setting the rules of the game for them, even if at the global level, trade is being weaponized. So those are resilient instruments that countries have used to make trade still an instrument for growth and prosperity.
Thank you. Mr. Grossi, this question is for you. Artificial intelligence is changing warfare as rapidly as it's changing commerce. Should the United Nations lead efforts to establish global rules for autonomous weapons, and what should those rules entail?
There are certain guardrails that can be applied, but we have to be extremely careful. People say that we need an IAEA for AI, because here you have an international organization that deals with a very sensitive technology and has been doing it right. Unfortunately, the algorithmic space, the way in which frontline models are developed in a very diffuse way through different jurisdictions, makes it extremely difficult to go for a top-down, over-normative approach on AI. What we will need to have, and do it together with those who are driving this in different parts of the world, we are going to need a collaborative platform to define together what are the certain behavioral rules that we may agree on in order not to stifle innovation that we all need and to avoid that we lose the more important factor, human in the loop.
Would you back a verification system?
A verification system of the type that you have for nuclear weapons, for example, would be an illusion. So you need something different. It would be good for me to say, yeah, do what we do at the IAEA. IAEA is based on material balance of tangible things. This is a different dimension, requires a different approach.
Ms. Rodriguez-Paquet, the question is for you. What is the most important lesson from COVID-19 that the world has yet to act upon? And if another pandemic arises during your first year in office, what would be your first priorities be?
Let's not call that into existence at all, because that would be devastating for the world community, especially now when we face severe financial constraints in many of our countries. Many of our countries have not recovered from COVID-19. And if you look at the report on the Sustainable Development Goals, you would see that COVID played a very big part in regressing that development for many states and stifling it in other states. I think we need to be prepared. We must always be prepared. God forbid there will be another pandemic, and we must be prepared for that. And I believe that the mechanisms that we have in place, the World Health Organization, for example, and member states being present there, and who went through the pandemic, all of us went through it, I think we're now better prepared for that. But if we don't have the necessary financing and the necessary vaccines and so on, we would see what would, the same thing would happen as happened before, where it was survival of the fittest.
So what would you do? I mean, if wealthy nations were to hoard vaccines, what would you do?
The Secretary General would have to use her voice. But apart from that, you will need to have the cooperation of all member states for us to address this. And this General Assembly discusses the pandemic ever so often, but I believe in the wisdom of our combined 193 member states as well. And we have seen what the pandemic has caused before, and I don't think that we want that to happen again.
Ms. Espinosa, this question is for you. At a time of fiscal pressure and competing priorities, how would you convince wealthier nations that financing climate adaptation is an investment in global stability rather than simply foreign aid?
Well, I don't think that we need to convince countries to do that. I think that the evidence, the data is out there, the science is out there. If you invest in resilience building and adaptation, you will have less migration, you will have more economic prosperity, you will have people living with dignity, protecting their livelihoods. So it is the best investment, and there is tons of evidence that that's the case. And I think we need more investment in adaptation for sure, more investment in resilience building. If you look at the outlook between investing in mitigation, in lowering emissions, and in adaptation, the balance is like that. So we need to balance investment in climate mitigation, adaptation, resilience building. The mechanisms are out there. There is a lack of implementation and political will. The Secretary General is well placed to make it happen and to make implementation and climate action a reality, especially because countries are for vulnerable countries in particular.
Mr. Sall, this question is for you, and it comes from a UN member state representative.
Good evening. I am Ambassador Taonga Mushayavano, permanent representative of the Republic of Zimbabwe to the United Nations. And my question is, what initiatives will you implement to advance meaningful reform of the global financial architecture, including address the debt burden, as well as operationalizing the severe commitment so that the Global South can access development financing on a just and equitable terms?
Merci beaucoup, Excellence, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur du Zimbabwe. Je l'ai dit tantôt, une concertation globale sera engagée pour réformer l'architecture financière internationale. On voit tous le poids de la dette. Et ce poids de la dette pour les pays en développement est moins relatif, est moins dû à l'ampleur de la dette qu'aux conditions de la dette. C'est-à-dire que les pays en développement, malheureusement, s'endettent 5 fois, voire 8 fois plus cher que les pays développés. Et cela est dû aux mécanismes qui sont en place. D'abord, mécanisme de garantie et de prime de risque par rapport aux pays en développement. Donc cette concertation devra aussi impliquer les agences de notation qui doivent travailler de concert avec les États membres, avec les AFI, pour que nous définissions un cadre approprié pour un accès équitable aux conditions de financement privé, mais mitiger le risque, parce que c'est là la limite du financement privé, et faire en sorte que les pays, par l'investissement privé, par le partenariat, puissent davantage commercer, et c'est dans l'intérêt de tous les États membres.
Thank you. And now to Michelle Bachelet, a question from a civil society organization representative.
In a context where human rights are increasingly challenged, how will the human rights pillar be prioritized in your mandate? How will the United Nations ensure that funding for human rights remain as part of the humanitarian response, including through the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights?
Well, as Secretary General, I must acknowledge and act upon legitimate concerns regarding the efficiency and effectiveness of the UN. As High Commissioner of Human Rights, I have seen firsthand how critical they are for, but also I would say as for the development of a member state. And as Secretary General, I will be ready to speak up with responsibility, but also with robust reason, every time it's appropriate, contributing to effective measures and also to end violence and violations. But I will actively seek to demonstrate to all concerned that human rights is crucial for international peace and also for sustainable development. I will ensure stronger coordination, I would say, among different agencies, funds, and programs that do develop human rights work at the ground. The other thing is to work with member states to avoid cuts to an organization that is chronically very ill financed, and also human resources are not big amounts of it. That's only, I believe it's only like 2 or 4% of the budget, of the regular budget that goes to the Office of the High Commissioner. And I will actively engage with leaders everywhere to ensure that we can mobilize voluntary contributions so human rights can be that important key pillar of the UN.
Thank you, Ms. Bachelet.
Let's move to our final question now, and it does focus on the first words of the UN Charter. We, the peoples. You will each have 1 minute to explain what you see is the greatest threat facing the world's peoples. And I begin with you, Caroline Rodriguez-Burkett.
I would say the threat to multilateralism. Multilateralism is the guarantee for our global security and protection, and we have to protect this at all costs. I know that the world out there is looking to see how multilateralism is benefiting the people on the ground. How is it ending conflicts or preventing conflicts? How it is delivering on development? But I also believe that we have an important responsibility, and as Secretary General I would work on this, is to communicate to our populations about the importance of the United Nations and multilateralism. But I think communicating the work of the UN is better when it's also underpinned by action, and action to make changes on the ground, to see development on the ground. And that is what I would do as Secretary General, communicating why the UN exists, why multilateralism is important, but also what actions are being taken by the United Nations to address the global challenges we face today.
The same question to you, Mr. Sall.
Merci beaucoup. Si nous voulons représenter dignement les peuples et répondre à la promesse de la Charte, nous devons revenir aux fondamentaux de l'organisation, la paix, la sécurité, le développement, les droits humains. Agir efficacement du monde, je rappelle aujourd'hui, on a près de 4 milliards de jeunes pour lesquels il faut trouver une éducation, une formation, un emploi. Il faut surtout défendre les femmes dans leurs droits, les jeunes filles dans leur éducation et dans leur statut. Donc travailler de concert avec l'ensemble des États membres autour de ces priorités doit permettre à l'issue des prochaines 5 années de voir que l'ONU est revenue au centre du jeu mondial dans le cadre d'un multilatéralisme rénové au service de l'ensemble des États membres.
Mr. Grossi.
A grave threat is that the current fragmentation we have been talking about, and upon which I think we all coincide, puts us in a point beyond convergence, beyond believing that in spite of all these differences, there are still common denominators. That generation 80 years ago had differences, but it understood that to avoid the scourge and the misery that had affected them twice in one generation, they had to do something different. We are in a difficult position now, and it is not impossible that we will reach the point that canceling out each other will be the rule. And for that, there is still one UN. Let's not forget that.
Ms. Greenspan.
I think that the main challenge for we the people is the belief that might is right, is the weakening of international law and humanitarian law, is the erosion of the belief what founded this organization, that was the great powers thought that they needed restraint. That's why they built an international organization where they will exert restraint, not only power. And we need to bring back that idea to the UN. We need to bring back that idea to the great powers and for the coalitions for multilateralism. A multilateralism coalition, the most stable coalition in the small and medium-sized countries, because we need the law, we need the framework, we need the charter, and we need to bring back to it, to the main initial idea, all the other powers also to be able to stabilize the capacity of the
Africa, where they have no jobs, or where there are extremist groups that are trying to recruit them. But I believe that the kind of challenges that the world is facing today are global challenges. So nobody's going to solve them themselves. So when there is polarization, fragmentation, intends to weaken the international community, that is really a problem. So that's why, as all of them, as I already said, we need a strong multilateralism. We need a UN that's agile, efficient, effective, transparent, accountable, and that takes in seriously all the different challenges that young people have, that women have, because peace is essential, but there will be no peace and security if there's no development. There will be no peace and security if there's no human rights. We need to work strongly on all of them to be able that people feel that this UN is really responding to what they need.
The greatest threat facing the world's people, to you, Maria Fernanda Espinosa.
Well, allow me to start with a quote. Elie Wiesel, a Nobel Peace Prize, said that the opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. And I am afraid of that, of indifference, especially understanding that nearly half of humanity is under 30 today. And yet the institutions that are shaping their future and their present are still designed, led, and governed by previous generations. And we see that innovators, leading companies, but also the majority of combatants, including non-armed state groups, gangs, are filled with young people that do not see a future. So my other keyword would be trust. We need to regain trust in international law, in the UN Charter, in the role of the UN, in the importance of cooperation and collective action. And for that, I think that as Secretary Generals, potential, all of us, and hopefully me, our responsibility is to make the UN relevant again, to deliver, to touch the hearts and souls of people on the ground, to serve people on the ground, and not to confuse activity with impact, and to build an organization that is more accountable to the people it serves. That is my commitment.
Thank you, Minister.
Well, tonight you've heard from the 6 candidates seeking to become the next Secretary General of the United Nations. You've had their ideas and conflict and diplomacy, responding to emerging technologies and addressing the global challenges that increasingly transcend national borders. Now I'd like to give each of you an opportunity to make a closing statement. In your closing remarks, tell us what your priorities would be in your first 100 days as Secretary General. We'll go in the reverse order of the opening statements, beginning with Macky Sall. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. My immediate action will be to build a strong team based on competence, diversity, and balanced geographical representation. I will work on 3 main priorities. First, I will strengthen the UN's capacity on peace and security through preventive diplomacy, early warning, mediation, good offices, and closer cooperation with regional organizations, particularly on peace operations. Second, I will initiate an operational review of its structures and mandates to improve the organization's efficiency and impact. I will launch consultations with member states on reform, including the UN80 initiative. I will also work with member states to address the UN's liquidity crisis while improving accountability and transparency. Third, I will keep human rights and development at the heart of the global agenda. I will begin consultations on the post-2030 agenda with member states, the Bretton Woods institutions, IFIs, the private sector, civil society, and philanthropy. I will promote development financing based more on investment, trade, and partnerships while improving developing countries' access to capital market, knowledge, and innovation. In my first 100 days, I want to restore trust and put the UN on a path to become more agile, more effective, and ready to listen, act, and bring people together. Thank you.
Carolyn Rodriguez-Burkett.
The first order of business, obviously, will be deploying my senior team. And of course, it will be geographically balanced. Firstly, of course, competence, but geographical balance and gender balance. And then I'll focus on 5 things. First, it's reform, advancing the reform of the Secretariat, which will be under my authority. But another aspect of that reform is providing the member states with the neutral information that they need to make the structural reforms, because that reform is in the hands of member states. Secondly, it will be on conflict resolution and prevention. And there I would look how the tools at the disposal of the Secretary General, be it mediation or the good offices, can be used or can be better used, and start deploying those. Thirdly, the humanitarian situation. We have a really terrible humanitarian situation, and some work has already been done in trying to improve that. But I would want to advance that, looking at what are the impediments, political, logistical, and how we can deliver better. And thirdly, addressing the unrepresented and underrepresented countries. I will have to commence that, because that came up from a lot of member states in the interactive dialogue. And so I would want to start work on that. And commencing discussions with the international financial institutions. As I mentioned before, even small steps that are systemic, that can bring relief to countries, especially when it comes to concessional financing, would make a huge difference, even as we work for greater reforms. But I want to do that in partnership, not from a pedestal speaking to the IFIs, but working in partnership and, of course, with member states. We have the multidimensional vulnerability index, and work has already started on going beyond GDP. But how do we use the MVI, for example, to work on concessional financing for the most vulnerable countries? And I would do all of this, working in close collaboration with member states, given my commitment to be close to member states, being accessible to member states in a very systematic way and not in an ad hoc fashion. I believe that's realistic for the first 100 days.
Rebecca Greenspan.
Yeah, momentum is set on day one. So in my first 100 days, I will return peacemaking to the heart of the organization. I will restore trust in the UN as a convener and establish a good officer support unit in the Executive Office of the Secretary General, a small, agile team operating at the highest political level. I will engage from my first day in office with all member states, the Security Council, and the parties to conflict. On peacekeeping, we need an integrated planning structure for peace security. One-size-fits-all tools no longer work. Pretending otherwise wastes resources and erodes credibility. We must be demand-driven and not supply-driven. Focus on realistic delivery, and we must partner more with regional organizations. Second, UN 80 broke important ground. Member states have invested in this process that must not go to waste. But cutting costs is not enough. Without a vision of change, that only will make us weaker. I will reform how incentives work, tackle the behavior that drives duplication and unhealthy competition. And we also have to reform from the top, not only from the bottom. I will build on Resolution 80-270 to put these organizations' finance back on solid footing. Third, rebuild trust. This is the most important ingredient for transformation. As we move from point A to point B, there will be fear, uncertainty, and disruption to the status quo. Not all will be convinced, not all will be eager. I treat communication and credibility as part of mandate delivery. I will engage the public through the formats, language, and platforms that they use. I will embody the change I will bring to this organization. And day by day, recover people's trust in the work that we do.
Please wrap up.
Thank you very much.
100 days might not be enough to do everything that needs to be done to put the UN back on track, but they will be a very good indication whether we mean business or it's just the same old thing. Statements, speeches, good intentions, we all know that. We've been there before, and it's not going to work. It didn't work before, it will not work now. We will have to have brutal honesty to recognize what we can do. And that will start with a different dialogue, a new deal, if I may use the expression, between the Secretary General and Member States. A new deal between the Secretary General and the Secretariat and the staff, to talk to them, to listen to them, not to sugarcoat problems, but to take care of them. It will need that we look at developmental areas with the wisdom that the new times and the new economic circumstances that we have dwelled upon during this conversation require. But that needs to walk the walk and not simply to talk the talk. When it comes to reform, of course, important. Everybody's a reformer now. Let's see what happens on January 1st. We will have to see and to separate what is within the mandate of the Secretary General, and there, yes, resolution, not wasting time. And for what is in the hands of the membership, to have this honest dialogue, to determine what is the level of our ambition. What do we really want to do with the UN? It is perfectly possible. We shouldn't lose hope. A UN that works, although it sounds incredible, is possible.
Maria Fernanda Espinosa.
Well, just to recall 100 days is a little more than 3 months, no? And it's hard to be a regional here, but I have to say that I will work in my first 100 days to recover, to set the foundations better, to recover credibility and trust within the UN system, with member states, and with the people we serve. And basically, let me just speak about 3 issues. Number one, it was already mentioned, but it's obvious. Establish a high-quality cabinet and a reformed executive office based on 3 issues: competence, 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 plus one, which is integrity. And I really, as Secretary General, need to ensure that my decisions are well informed and timely, and that I'm able to advise and inform member states. Number 2, focus on reform implementation and financial stability. Let me reveal something here. Today, 72 member states have not yet paid their dues to the organization. This is, of course, not only a financial issue. I think it is a message that we need to regain trust of member states so they see value for money, so they see that this organization is to become more accountable, more transparent, and more impact-driven. Of course, accelerate the implementation and follow through the UN80 package and the decisions that have been made by member states. I think UN80, as I have said, is a very good start, but more is needed to transit from budget cuts and mergers of agencies and programs to a new business model for the UN based on impact, performance, and accountability. And number 3, I will be present and visible where the crises and conflicts are. I will make prevention not a slogan, but an operating principle, a discipline, and I will establish very early a prevention and early action hub to inform member states on time, and I will have the UN machinery ready and active to prevent conflicts. I will be there myself, carrying the UN flag. And
Please
of
wrap
course,
up, Ms. Espinosa.
if I have to talk about crisis, let me close with that. This institution is on crisis. So I will be present here too to restore trust and communication with the staff members of this organization. We need to restore this capacity of dialogue. And basically, what I would do is recover the mandate of this institution in full, make the UN relevant, prevent conflict, and protect people. Thank you.
Michelle Bachelet.
Well, throughout my tenure, my overarching priority will be to be present and active wherever, whenever, and however I can be of service to the purposes and principles of the Charter of the UN. But I always thought when I was a president that it's good to get objectives for the first period because you focus on that and you can accomplish. So in my first 100 days, I will prioritize and accomplish, appoint key senior management officials on the basis of course, prove competence and integrity, but also we need gender and geographical balance. Personally, and very early on, I want to engage with member states on key management challenges. This means making substantial progress on how to best deepen and accelerate reforms that combine greater efficiencies and effectiveness. The goal will always be to make the UN leaner, but muscled. We don't want to make the UN weak. And in this area, it's not only to work and engage with members, but also with the staff, because I know that the staff want the same, want a very strong UN. Second, I want to secure, I will try at least to secure the financial stability of the organization through payment of assessed and voluntary contribution, which is indispensable for all else. I will review all institutional and financial tools available to the Secretary General under Chapter 6 in order to boost effective action on peacemaking and peace building. I will look very carefully at the recommendations made today at the Security Council. Meanwhile, identify opportunities for enhanced contribution to resolving current conflicts, especially where violations of human rights and international humanitarian law are the gravest and humanitarian needs the greatest. Guided by existing multilateral commitments, start a sustained and result-oriented dialogue with all relevant actors to exponentially increase finance for development and climate action. This is a very condition for robust, long-term sustainable development and also something that's been absent here, the ensurance of the Agenda 2030. To succeed, I will work in good faith with all those willing to help ensure the UN continues to be the tremendous, powerful force for good it has been for decades. I think millions around the world truly need it.
Thank you, Ms. Bachelet.
Michelle Bachelet, Maria Fernanda Espinoza, Rafael Mariano Grossi, Rebecca Greenspan, Caroline Rodriguez Burkett, Macky Sall. One of you may be the 10th Secretary General of the United Nations, a Secretary General who will inherit a world more divided, more technologically complex, and yet probably more interconnected than at any point in the UN's 81-year history. But there are going to be a lot of challenges that one of you will have to face as the next leader. And the decisions that the next leader will make over the next several months will have an inordinate impact on the next 81 years of this institution and the ability to be an effective steward for the world's 8 billion people.
From all of us at Bloomberg, thank you to the President of the United Nations General Assembly and her team for their partnership in presenting this town hall. And thank you for joining us. Good night.
you.